They were on the man she once made tremble with a kiss. She had worn the same gown he once peeled from her skin on a rainy Milan night back, when promises sounded like lullabies and his breath on her neck meant forever. She had felt him then, truly felt him. And now, 7 weeks into a pregnancy he didn't know about, she still remembered. The way he kissed her stomach like he was praying over her womb. My beautiful family, welcome once again to Love and Twilight with Dr. Phillips, where every story carries a message of love, healing, and reflection. Before we dive into today's journey, let me feel your presence. Type "I'm here" with you, Dr. Phillips, in the comments so I know you're walking beside me. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of love. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a single story that touches the heart. But tonight wasn't about nostalgia. It was about revelation. She clutched the flute of sparkling cider she wasn't drinking. She had memorized the way he laughed when tipsy, the slight tilt of his head when amused, the way his lips curled, mocking and amused, just like now, as he whispered into the ear of another woman near the champagne bar. Phoebe turned away. Her heartbeat tapped against the golden silk like a secret. She hadn't come to compete. She hadn't come to win him. She had come to tell him the truth. Their child deserved that much. She drifted through the sea of Italian elites, perfume, cologne, ego. Every step toward him tasted like acid and hope. She waited until he slipped away from the ballroom and onto the private terrace overlooking the Arno River. The fireworks were timed with orchestral music below. He lit a cigar. No one noticed the smoke or the cracks forming in her resolve. She stepped into the night. "Kinley," she said softly. He didn't flinch, didn't turn around. "I need to talk to you." Finally he turned, slowly, like a man humoring the past. His green eyes swept over her gown. For a moment, they softened. Recognition, desire, memory. But then his face hardened again. She inhaled. "I need to tell you something." "I do too," he cut in, already turning back toward the dark river. "Let me go first." She blinked, lips parting. He sipped his wine, casual, callous. "Phoebe, this thing between us, it was nice. But let's not make it more than it was." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "It's just an entanglement. That's all it ever was." The words hit like wind through stained glass. No explosion, just cold shattering. Her fingers trembled against the railing. You said—" "I wanted a child," he continued, shrugging. "Not a relationship. You were soft, Phoebe, sweet. But sweetness fades." Her chest hollowed. "I don't really love you." And with that he turned, smirking faintly as the fireworks behind him exploded in color. "Don't make this dramatic," he added. But the drama was already written. Phoebe didn't speak. She couldn't. Her body did instead. Her hand curled over her stomach instinctively, protectively. Their baby stirred. She wasn't just broken. She was erased. As Kinley strolled back into the party with champagne in one hand and a woman laughing in his ear, Phoebe stood alone on the terrace, one hand over her womb, the other wiping a tear she didn't want anyone to see. This was not a goodbye. This was a rebirth. The fireworks ended with a hollow thump, fading into applause. Phoebe didn't hear the music resume. Her body had turned to marble, standing on that terrace long after Kinley disappeared into the crowd of polished lies and polished shoes. Inside her, silence cracked like ice on fire. She left the party without telling anyone. No driver, no goodbye, not even her best friend. The long hallway back to the exit felt like a runway of humiliation. Her heels tapped against the stone, echoing louder than her breathing. One hand cradled her abdomen. 7 weeks. 7 silent weeks she thought would lead to hope. They led to this. Her taxi driver didn't speak English. That was a gift. She didn't want questions. She didn't want pity. Just a ride back to her temporary apartment, a bathroom sink to lean over, and a mirror that might understand the woman now staring back. When she got home, the tears came with a vengeance. Not loud, not screaming, just steady. She sat on the cold marble bathroom floor, back against the cabinet, dress still glittering like a lie. Her hands curled over her knees, pulling them to her chest. She stared at the ring he once gave her. A vintage sapphire, he'd said, reminded me of your eyes. She slid it off. It made no sound when it hit the bottom of the trash bin. 2 hours passed. Her face was bare now, her makeup gone. her soul stripped. She stood in front of the mirror, lifting the golden gown from her body like it was made of poison. Beneath it, the soft curve of her stomach peeked through. Her baby, his baby, the child created in a moment of warmth, now left to bloom in coldness. Phoebe sat on the bed with her travel bag half packed and her laptop open. She pulled up her calendar. Her next art showing in New York was weeks away, but she wouldn't go back to the city, not now, not when the only thing waiting for her was headlines, curious eyes, and rooms where Kinley's name still carried weight. She made a decision, and once made, she didn't hesitate. By dawn, she was gone. No note, no forwarding address, no explanation, just a passport scan that showed she'd returned to the States, though in truth, it was only a connecting stop. She rerouted from Amsterdam. Her final destination was a sleepy village south of Amalfi, a place neither he nor his lawyers would think to search. When she landed, it was raining, but not the kind of rain that ruins, the kind that cleanses. The woman who checked her into the small villa was a widow with warm eyes and a kitchen that smelled like oregano and lemon. No name needed. The old woman smiled. Only peace. Phoebe nodded. Call me Fina. It felt right. Something short, something new, something Kinley couldn't say or ruin. She wasn't running. She was resetting. 3 days later, she began working in the ceramics shop tucked into a side street near the sea. Her fingers, once used to fine brushes and oil paints, now traced pottery dust and clay. It was quiet work, soul work, the kind that didn't demand performance. The old woman who owned the shop never asked questions. She simply handed Phoebe a linen apron and made sure she never skipped breakfast. You eat for 2 now, she said, not even needing to ask. Phoebe blinked. How? I've seen enough women leave men behind, the woman replied, slicing a fig. You carry more than a child. You carry a decision. Time stretched gently. Her skin warmed under the Italian sun. Her stomach grew. Her shoulders dropped from their usual tension. At night, she wrote letters she'd never send, letters to Kinley, sometimes full of rage, sometimes quiet with longing, but most of the time just full of truths he never let her speak. Dear Kinley, she kicks when I play Puccini. I hope you hear that in your nightmares. I hope one day it wakes you up. She sealed that one, but never mailed it. Another night she wrote, Dear Kinley, I loved you too gently. That won't be a mistake I make twice. And another, softer still, Dear Kinley, she has your eyes. But I hope she never looks at anyone the way I looked at you. One afternoon, she walked past the village chapel and saw a local mother rocking her infant beneath the olive trees. Phoebe paused. She touched her belly, now visibly swollen beneath her white dress, and whispered something to the baby growing inside. We're going to be okay. No one applauded. No one tweeted. But in that moment, she became more than just a woman who had been left behind. She became someone reborn. Back in Florence, Kinley laughed at another man's joke over espresso. He didn't know that the woman he claimed not to love had given him a legacy. But soon, a letter would arrive, and nothing would be the same again. The sunrise in Florence had a way of pretending nothing ever happened. Kinley stood shirtless on the balcony of his penthouse, coffee in hand, phone buzzing in the distance. He ignored it. His mind was elsewhere, on stock markets, expansion deals, legacy. Not once did it flicker toward the woman who vanished hours earlier, wearing gold and secrets. He assumed she went back to New York. He assumed wrong. 3 countries away, Phoebe leaned her head against the airplane window. Her legs curled beneath her as the flight curved over the sea. She had changed. No makeup. Hair pulled into a loose bun. The engagement ring long gone. Her entire identity felt like a costume she'd outgrown. The flight attendant asked if she was okay. Phoebe nodded. But inside, she was unraveling, quietly, purposefully. This wasn't an escape. It was an erasure. And it began with letting herself disappear. By the time Kinley woke again, she was already stepping into her new life. She'd chosen a village no map would highlight. A place so quiet, even the breeze spoke in whispers. There were no designer boutiques, no private chauffeurs, just hand-washed linens on lines between rooftops, women laughing in dialects not taught, in schools, and a beach so intimate it barely allowed more than 2 footsteps at once. Phoebe walked barefoot from the cottage to the sea every morning, not because she missed Kinley, but because she needed to remind herself she still belonged to something gentle. The pregnancy settled into her bones. She woke earlier, slept deeper, ate slower. The widow she worked for, named Lucia, prepared meals rich in herbs and maternal silence. Lucia never asked questions, but she always touched Phoebe's hand before she left each day. One morning, Lucia handed her a folded paper envelope. "Postcard," she said with a wink. "Write to someone who hurt you, but don't send it." Phoebe opened it that night and wrote only 4 words, "You never deserved me." She tucked the postcard under her pillow. Back in Florence, Kinley barely registered her absence. To him, she was a warmth he'd already classified as handled. His work was booming. His name appeared on magazine covers, in real estate deals, in elite gala speeches. No one asked about Phoebe, and if they did, he replied. She moved on. So did he, or so he told himself. But in the quietest hours, when wine didn't help and women bored him, after 10 minutes, her face crept in like a ghost without permission. The golden dress, the way she used to tuck her hair behind her ear when nervous, the softness he once mocked. He never checked her flight record. He never called, because if he had, he would have known she never reached New York. In the Amalfi village, the months passed like poetry. Phoebe's belly grew round and high. She painted again, on clay, on paper, on driftwood. Lucia brought her figs and old lullabies. The village women offered her lavender and soup. No one judged her. No one asked for her past. They called her Fina, and Fina smiled. At night, the baby kicked as she lay under olive branches, writing letters in her head. "You didn't just leave me, you left her too. And one day she'll ask why. She wouldn't have answers for that. Only love, only presence, only the truth that she was there while he wasn't." The morning she went into labor, the sea was calm. No rush, no panic, just pain that felt ancient and holy. Lucia held her hand, whispering prayers in Italian, tears mixing with sweat. Phoebe didn't scream. She roared quietly, body folded over itself, soul unraveling and rebuilding in the same breath. And when her daughter came, wrapped in warmth, slick with life, crying like a tiny queen, Phoebe held her to her chest and cried too. Not for Kinley, not for the past, but for the way this child had arrived through fire and still made her feel holy. She named her Mireia. It meant miracle. Elsewhere, Kinley signed another contract, a business deal, another empire. He laughed at something his assistant said, clinked glasses at lunch, stared at a view that used to impress him. But when night came, and he lay in bed alone, something scratched inside him, an emptiness he didn't understand. Weeks later, Phoebe took a photo. Not for anyone, just for her. Mireia was asleep on her chest, one tiny fist curled beside her lips. Phoebe smiled down at her, wrapped in white linen, the Amalfi sun pouring through the window. The shutter clicked. And then, she opened her old laptop. She wrote 4 words on the back of the photo. "She doesn't need you," folded it gently, sealed it in an envelope, and sent it to Florence, to Kinley Barrett, to the man who said he didn't love her. The village was a dream Phoebe hadn't dared to ask for. Tucked along the southern edge of Italy's coast, it didn't welcome tourists so much as forget them. Here, days started with the scent of rosemary bread and ended with sea breeze tangled in lemon leaves. Here, no one knew her, and that was precisely why she chose it. No one looked twice at a woman who spoke softly, walked slowly, and asked for nothing. Lucia's cottage was perched just uphill from the sea. It smelled of lavender water and old books. The bedroom was small but sun-filled. The mattress squeaked, the sheets were scratchy, and the ceiling fan clicked every third turn, but to Phoebe, it was sanctuary. She unpacked slowly, as if shaking off pieces of her old life. First, she folded away the sketchbook Kinley once bought her on a trip to Venice. Then, she buried the last ultrasound printout inside a hollowed-out cookbook. Last, she stared at her passport, her real name stamped in crisp black ink, and slid it beneath the floorboard, between 2 loose wooden planks. When Lucia asked for her name, she didn't hesitate. "Fina," she said. Lucia didn't blink, just smiled and replied, "Then Fina, you are..." Her days became simple, almost sacred. Each morning, she helped Lucia grind herbs and press clay in the ceramic shop. It was a space where time melted. Bowls, vases, little dishes painted with violets. Fina never spoke unless spoken to. She listened instead, to the sea, to the slow rhythm of village chatter, to the hush of her own thoughts finally finding space to breathe. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her heart, once restless, had slowed its beat. By the second week, the villagers knew her as the quiet girl who walked barefoot and hummed lullabies to her belly while working. She wore flowing linen dresses, her hair in braids or tied up with scarves. Her glow wasn't fashionable, it was maternal, grounded, unpolished, beautiful in a way only peace can make someone look. Lucia often watched her from behind the counter and said nothing. But one day, as Fina organized a shelf of glazed plates, the old woman murmured, "You look more alive now." Fina paused. "I feel more alive." Lucia smiled. Sometimes we must vanish to remember who we were before we were loved badly. At night, Fina wrote in a notebook bound in soft leather. Not stories, not letters, but truths. He never asked if I wanted the child, only if I wanted him. And I did. Foolishly. Entirely. Until wanting him felt like betrayal to myself. Some nights, she read those words out loud to her unborn daughter. Other nights, she just pressed her palm to her belly and whispered, "We're not broken. We're just beginning." There was no mirror in the shop, but Fina didn't need one. She could see the change in her gait, her voice, the way the world reacted to her. No longer orbiting someone else's brilliance, she found her own quiet gravity. Lucia gifted her a small terracotta necklace one afternoon. "To protect the baby," she said. Fina held it to her chest, then tied it around her neck. "Thank you." "You're becoming someone new," Lucia said gently. "No," Fina answered. "I'm becoming someone I always was." Before he tried to erase me, she took long walks by the sea, sometimes with sandals, sometimes barefoot. The stones hurt at first, but over time, her soles toughened. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. On one of those walks, a little girl waved at her from a fishing boat. Fina waved back, tears stinging unexpectedly. She realized then how much she longed to be a mother, not just because Kinley didn't want to be a father, but because love, real love, needed somewhere to grow, and her daughter deserved soil not poisoned by betrayal. One night, the pain woke her early. Not the pain of heartbreak, the kind of ache that shifts bones and rearranges destiny. Her baby was preparing. Fina lit a candle and sat on the floor, legs crossed, palms resting on her belly. She didn't panic. She breathed. She whispered lullabies. And when Lucia entered with warm towels and salt water for washing, she said nothing, just kneeled beside her and held her steady. It wasn't time yet. But soon, very soon, the village priest offered to bless the child ahead of her arrival. Fina declined politely. "She'll be born beneath trees," she said. "That's holy enough for us." He nodded, not questioning her faith, only bowing his head in reverence. A week later, she bought a basket from the market, a soft woven cradle. Inside it, she placed a muslin blanket, a hand-sewn rabbit doll, and a lavender sachet. She ran her fingers across the edge. This would be the first bed her daughter knew. Not a penthouse crib with golden rails, not a hospital room with antiseptic walls. Just this, humble, quiet, safe. As the chapter of her new name deepened, so did her stillness. She no longer flinched at the memory of Kinley's voice. She no longer imagined him reaching out. Instead, she imagined her daughter's first cry, her first grasp, the sound of her laughter chasing away silence. Fina no longer needed saving. She had already saved herself. And in doing so, she built a life no one would ever take from her again. At night, the Amalfi breeze carried with it the scent of sea salt and rosemary, slipping through the shutters of Lucia's cottage like an old friend. Fina often sat by the window, notebook in lap, pen between fingers that no longer trembled. She didn't sleep easily, not out of fear, but because her thoughts kept her company now, the kind of thoughts that required ink. The first letter she wrote started with his name. "Kinley, she kicks when I play Puccini. I don't know if it's protest or joy. Maybe both." She paused, stared at the page, and crossed out the name. Then she wrote it again. "Kinley, I told you I needed to talk that night." I never finished the sentence. "You didn't let me." She didn't sign the letter, didn't seal it, just folded it neatly and slid it into the wooden box beside her bed, already filling with similar pages. Each night, she added more. Letters written by a woman slowly forgiving herself for being too trusting. Letters that didn't beg, didn't rage. They simply told the truth. Some were only a paragraph. You looked at me like I was delicate, and when I needed strength, you disappeared. Others filled entire pages. I wonder what you would have said if I told you sooner. I wonder if anything would have changed. But I can't live in maybes. I have a daughter now, and she deserves certainties. Each letter was a release, not to him, to herself. Lucia noticed the pages piling up. You're not mailing them? She asked gently one morning over coffee. Fina shook her head. They're not meant for his healing. Lucia sipped slowly. But they're helping yours. Fina looked down at her belly. They're helping ours. On the 12th letter, she didn't use his name. She addressed it to the man who left before the child arrived. You don't get to choose silence and call it peace. You don't get to vanish and expect to be remembered kindly. I will not hate you, but I will never protect your memory. This one she read aloud. To the walls, to the candlelight, to herself. The baby kicked. Fina smiled, hand over her belly. You heard that, didn't you? She imagined her daughter years from now, reading these words, not as wounds, but as proof that her mother fought through the ache with her heart still intact. She wanted her child to know, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it folds pages. Sometimes it stays. Another night, as the wind howled louder than usual, Fina sat under a wool shawl and wrote a letter that made her hands shake again. If you come looking, you'll find someone you don't recognize. I won't be soft the way I was. I won't wait with hopeful eyes. I won't open the door. But she hesitated, because she wasn't sure if it was true. The letters became a ritual. Wash up, light the lamp, check the baby's kicks, write one truth. Some nights it was about the betrayal. Other nights it was about her art. I've started sketching again. Mireia likes the sound of pencils on paper. She calms when I draw. She knows creation heals. Some letters turned into lullabies. You will never hear his voice, but you'll hear mine. And I promise that will always be enough. And others, well, others were filled with fire. You called me soft like it was a curse. But you know what's soft? The ocean. The tide that shapes stone. You were never strong enough to stay. On her last day of the 8th month, she found herself sitting by the chapel. Mireia moved beneath her ribs like a rhythm. Fina watched 2 swallows circle above the olive trees. She opened her notebook to a blank page. This one wasn't for Kinley. It was for herself. Fina, you survived it. You took your broken heart and grew life around it. You created something beautiful where something cold once lived. You're not the woman he abandoned. You're the mother she'll run to. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The wind carried the rest away. Later that evening, Lucia handed her a bundle of clean blankets and a tin of chamomile. Soon, the old woman said softly. Fina nodded. I feel her getting ready. She's lucky, you know. Fina smiled. So am I. That night, she didn't write. Instead, she lay on her side, feeling every movement in her belly like poetry. And when she finally drifted off, the wooden box full of letters sat quietly at her bedside, unsent, unread, but more powerful than anything she'd ever spoken aloud. Because some truths don't need to be delivered to heal. They just need to be written. The olive trees swayed gently in the early morning breeze, their branches whispering like midwives. Fina felt the first true wave of pain just after sunrise. It wasn't sharp, it was deep, ancient, like something sacred moving through her bones. She gripped the edge of the wooden table, her breath caught between teeth and tremble. Lucia, already awake in the kitchen, noticed immediately. It's time, the old woman said softly. Fina nodded, eyes wide but steady. There was no hospital, no flashing machines or sterile corridors, just a stone floor, fresh towels, warm water, and centuries of maternal wisdom wrapped in Lucia's hands. They moved slowly to the back garden. It was where Fina had sat every afternoon, sketching bowls and birds, painting Mireia's name on smooth river stones, where she once whispered lullabies into the wind. Now, it would be the place her child entered the world. Lucia had already prepared the spot, layers of linen, a low stool, shaded by 2 olive trees grown close enough to cradle them. Fina knelt, hands braced, knees pressed into soft earth. The pain returned, stronger this time, rippling up her spine and down her thighs. She didn't scream. She breathed. Through every surge, through every shudder, she stayed present. "I'm here," she whispered to her daughter. "I'm not leaving. Not like him." The labor was long. 6 hours of moans, muffled by olive leaves. Of Lucia pressing cool cloths to her neck, whispering in Italian prayers Fina didn't understand but felt like truth. At one point, Fina gritted her teeth and cried out, "I can't." Lucia's response was calm, firm. "You already are." And then, like lightning cracking a dam, the pressure shifted. A deep, instinctual push took over her entire body. Fina leaned forward, fingers digging into the dirt, sweat rolling down her spine. One more wave, one more cry, and then silence, followed by a sound so raw, so alive, it knocked the wind from her chest. Her daughter, crying, gasping, claiming space. Lucia moved quickly, wrapping the baby in white linen. She handed her over without ceremony, just reverence. "She's strong," the old woman said. "Like her mother." Fina cradled her, breath catching as she stared down into the tiny face that had been kicking against her ribs for months. Mireia, dark curls, wet and soft, pursed lips, eyes still sealed but already full of spirit. Fina kissed her forehead, tears falling freely now, not from pain but from the overwhelming clarity of what she had done. She had birthed herself again through this child, not as the woman Kinley had walked away from, but as a mother, a protector, a lighthouse in the storm. They sat under the olive trees for a long time. The baby eventually calmed, pressing her cheek into Fina's bare chest, listening to the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat. Fina didn't say much. She didn't have to. Her hands, her breath, her presence, everything spoke for her. "I choose you," she whispered, "every day, no matter who didn't." Later that afternoon, Lucia returned with warm broth and honeyed bread. She didn't speak either, just placed the food near them and covered them both with a soft blanket. Mireia stirred in her sleep. Fina adjusted the linen and sang softly under her breath. It wasn't a song she'd written down. It was something new, something only the two of them would ever know. That night, as they rested in the small bedroom, Fina wrote one more letter. But this time, it wasn't for Kinley. It wasn't even for herself. It was for her daughter. "My darling girl, you are not the beginning of a wound. You are the beginning of my healing. I carried you through heartbreak and silence, and I will carry you through the world, not because I must, but because I want to, because you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. You are not his mistake. You are my miracle. Love, your mother." She folded the page and placed it in the box of letters, on top, where it belonged. Then she laid down beside Mireia, wrapped one arm around her, and stared at the moon through the open window. The pain was gone now. Only fullness remained. Florence was having one of its colder mornings. Kinley Barrett sat in his penthouse, the sky outside washed in gray. A fire burned low in the marble hearth, an untouched espresso cooled beside his tablet. He had a meeting in 30 minutes. His calendar was full. His mind wasn't. He kept rereading the final clause in a merger agreement, but the words had lost meaning hours ago. He was restless in a way that couldn't be blamed on work. The knock came at 9:06 a.m., firm, quick, not the concierge. He opened the door himself. Phoebe's sister stood there, Lila, wearing a long brown coat and holding a white envelope. Her expression was unreadable. "Can I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside without a word. Lila didn't sit. She handed him the envelope with 2 hands, as though it carried more than weight, more than paper. "She didn't ask me to do this," she said. "In fact, she'd probably hate that I'm here. But I couldn't ignore it." Kinley turned the envelope over. No return address. No stamps. Just his name. Handwritten. He recognized the cursive instantly. Phoebe. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he stared at it, the tension in his jaw sharpening. "I thought she was in New York," he muttered. Lila gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "You thought wrong. Where is she? She doesn't want to be found. I need to talk to her." Lila raised her hand. "You had your chance, Kinley. You said what you said. She doesn't owe you anything now." His hands clenched. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You didn't mean to say she was just an entanglement?" Lila snapped. "You didn't mean to say you never loved her?" Kinley looked away. Lila's voice softened. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here because she sent you something." And you should see it." Without another word, she turned and left. He stood there for a long time, envelope unopened, until the fire in the hearth cracked loud enough to pull him back into the room. He sat on the edge of the leather couch, tore the paper with trembling fingers, and pulled out a single photograph. His breath caught. A baby, swaddled in white, dark curls, full lips, eyes wide, clear, defiant, deeply familiar. He didn't need a test. He didn't need time. He knew. His daughter. His. Beneath the photo, scrawled in that same delicate handwriting, were 4 words: "She doesn't need you." The photo slipped from his fingers. It landed on the floor with a whisper. Kinley didn't move. He stared straight ahead, but the fire blurred. His pulse slowed, then spiked, then vanished somewhere inside his chest. It was as if someone had carved him open without a knife. He thought the worst thing he'd done was walk away, but now he understood. He hadn't just walked. He'd erased her. He'd denied her presence, dismissed her softness, and treated the most sacred thing they'd created as disposable. A daughter. A living, breathing, perfect child. And he'd missed everything. His knees buckled. Literally. He collapsed to the floor, hands braced against hardwood, shoulders shaking. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet devastation. He buried his face in his palms. What had he done? He tried to speak, tried to rationalize, to name what he felt, but nothing made it past his throat. This wasn't guilt. It was ruin. And it had arrived not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that his words had consequences. That love couldn't be dismissed without cost. Hours passed. The espresso went cold. The fire died. The city below kept living. Kinley didn't move. Eventually, when the light outside dimmed, he stood. He picked up the photo again, held it carefully now, like it was glass. Her eyes, his shape, Phoebe's mouth, and something else. Something neither of them had ever learned to be, whole. He found the golden ring box in his study drawer, the one he'd bought but never used. He stared at it long and hard before closing it again. He walked to the bar, poured 2 fingers of scotch, didn't drink it. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up her last known itinerary. New York. Except it wasn't. He checked again. The trail ended in Amsterdam. He kept digging, until one flight, one faint thread, a booking from a Florence travel agency she once used. A woman had asked about villages near the coast. No name, just a voice. He called the number. The woman who answered said, "She didn't leave details, but I remember her. She was quiet, kind." He pressed, begged. Finally, she gave him the name of a town near Amalfi. No guarantee she was still there, but it was something. And something was enough. Kinley sold the penthouse 2 days later. The suits were packed away. The boardroom appearances canceled. He didn't leave a message for anyone. He just vanished, not to disappear, but to try, one last time, to be the man Phoebe might not push away if he knocked, gently, without entitlement. And more than that, to see his daughter. Even if it was from a distance, even if he didn't deserve to speak. Kinley didn't sleep that night. He sat on the floor beside the fireplace, the baby photo still clutched in one hand, the empty envelope in the other. The room was silent, but his mind echoed with those 4 words. "She doesn't need you." He mouthed them aloud, like a confession. Again, and again. Every repetition stripped something from him, layer after layer of arrogance, defense, denial, until nothing was left but truth. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror. The man staring back wasn't grieving. He wasn't angry. He was hollow. He looked older, not in age. Kinley's face was still sharp, jaw still defined, eyes still piercing. But the shine was gone. The curated charm, the practiced indifference, it had all cracked. What stared back at him now was not a CEO, not a polished success story. It was a man who had walked away from everything that could have made him whole. He pulled open the drawer in his walk-in closet and found the scarf Phoebe had left once, wrapped around a bottle of wine during a winter weekend they'd spent in Tuscany. She had forgotten it. He hadn't. He held it now, pressed it to his chest, then tucked it into the bag he was packing. Every decision he had once considered bold now felt brittle. He told himself that needing no one was strength. That detachment was wisdom. That vulnerability was dangerous. But what did that get him? A quiet penthouse, a bank account with too many commas, and a daughter who would grow up thinking her father didn't care enough to stay. He walked through the flat one last time, paused at the terrace where Phoebe had stood that night. He closed his eyes. He could still see her in that dress, golden, soft, waiting to be heard, and he had shut her down before she could speak, because her voice had scared him, because her tenderness had felt like a mirror he didn't want to look into, because love required courage, and he had built an empire on control, not courage. His driver arrived at noon. Kinley carried only one suitcase, a leather satchel, and the envelope now folded in half and kept in his inner coat pocket. He didn't leave a note. There was no grand farewell. He didn't deserve one. The train to Naples was quiet. He sat near the window, his reflection flickering in the glass. At one stop, a mother boarded with a toddler. The boy laughed too loudly, knocked over a juice box, and climbed onto her lap with clumsy joy. Kinley watched them in silence. At one point, the child looked over at him and smiled. Kinley tried to smile back. It didn't quite land, but the ache in his chest did. When he arrived in Amalfi, the breeze carried a different kind of stillness. It wasn't the silence of power or privacy. It was the kind of hush that invited reflection, the kind that made the noise inside you louder by contrast. He rented a small motorbike and began driving inland. He didn't have an address, just a town name and a memory of Phoebe's old journals, how she once spoke of olive trees and pottery and the kind of places you could disappear into without ever being missed. Except now, she was missed, so deeply it changed his breathing. He didn't find her the first day, or the second, but on the third, just before noon, he passed a chapel on a hill and saw her. She wasn't alone. She had a baby on her hip, a girl, dark curls like his, skin warm from sun, tiny legs swinging, one hand grasping her mother's dress. Kinley pulled the bike over slowly, heart hammering so hard it echoed in his ears. Phoebe hadn't seen him yet. He didn't move, didn't dare. He just watched. Phoebe knelt by the chapel steps adjusting the baby's hat. She smiled, said something the breeze carried away. The girl giggled, a soft bell-like sound that made Kinley's eyes sting instantly. The child leaned into Phoebe, resting her head on her chest. Secure, loved. She doesn't need you. The words roared louder now, not as an accusation, but as a reality he could no longer deny. He'd missed the first cry, the first laugh, the first time she grabbed her mother's finger and wouldn't let go. He had no right to ask for anything, but he had come to ask anyway, not for forgiveness, for permission to try. He waited until they walked into the cafe nearby. Then he followed, not with urgency, with reverence. When she looked up from the counter and saw him, beard grown in, shirt wrinkled from the road, eyes unguarded, Phoebe froze. Mireia stirred in her arms. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Not at first. Then, finally, Kinley said one word. Hi. Phoebe didn't move. The cafe went quiet, not because anyone noticed Kinley, but because time had its own way of slowing in moments like these. He stood by the doorway, the morning light casting his shadow across the floor. His beard was longer than she remembered, his shirt wrinkled, his shoulders hunched in a way that no amount of wealth could disguise. Mireia stirred, sensing something. She looked up at her mother with a confused pout, then turned toward the stranger who hadn't stopped staring. Phoebe pulled her daughter closer. Kinley raised his hand slightly, not as a plea, just a signal. I won't stay, he said gently. I just needed to see you. Her jaw tightened. You saw me. Now leave. His throat bobbed. She's beautiful. She doesn't know who you are. I wouldn't expect her to. You said I was soft, Phoebe snapped, each word clipped. You said I was a distraction. I know what I said. Then don't act surprised that you lost us. He nodded. Quiet, almost grateful for her anger, because it meant she still cared enough to feel something. I came here to say nothing, he whispered. Just to see her once. Just to carry the image of what I gave up. Phoebe looked away. Mireia babbled, tugging at her mother's sleeve. You have no right to her, she said coldly. I know. No right to me. He met her eyes. I know that too. She should have screamed, thrown her drink, walked out. But instead she stood there, holding their daughter, standing in the exact space where she had once imagined him kneeling with a ring, not regrets. And yet, here he was, Empty-handed. No apology grand enough. No excuse sharp enough to cut through what he did. Only presence. Only a man stripped of his armor. She gestured toward the exit. Go. He didn't argue. He turned, walked out of the cafe, and stood on the dusty road for a long moment, as if unsure where to go next. Phoebe stepped outside just as he swung a leg over his bike. Why now? She asked. He looked up, startled. What? Why did you come now, Kinley? He took a breath. Because when I saw her photo, everything I thought mattered stopped mattering. And when I read your words, I realized I had nothing left to protect myself from. She narrowed her gaze. You still sound rehearsed. He shook his head. I threw the script away, Phoebe. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Silence. Then, quietly, how did you find me? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wedding invitation. Her sister's handwriting across the back, one line, an address. I followed this. It was the only thing I had. Phoebe folded her arms, still holding Maria. You could have sent a letter. I didn't want words anymore. I've already misused too many. The baby squirmed in her arms. Kinley stared, mesmerized. Can I? He started, then stopped himself. No, of course not. Phoebe blinked. Something about that moment, the way he caught himself before asking, rattled her, not because it was guilt, but because it was restraint, real, painful restraint. She didn't offer the child. She didn't soften. But she didn't walk away either. You're thinner, she murmured, more observation than concern. I forgot how to eat for a while. And the beard? I didn't plan it. It just happened. She nodded slowly, her gaze scanning his face like she was seeing him for the first time, or maybe trying to find traces of the man she once trusted. She didn't find him, but she found someone quieter, someone grieving. He stepped back toward the bike. Phoebe looked down at Maria, who had fallen asleep against her chest. Then she glanced up again. Don't follow us home. I won't. She hesitated. If you come back tomorrow, don't bring words, don't bring flowers. What should I bring? Nothing, she said. Just silence. If you want to prove anything, do it by staying out of the way until you're worth being in it. Kinley nodded once, and without another word, he started the motorbike and rode away. Phoebe stood alone in the quiet street, the same road where she once walked away from the past. Now, she was watching it try to walk toward her. But she had changed, and he would have to learn the long way that redemption wasn't a right. It was a burden, earned, slowly. The cafe had no name, just a faded wooden sign and a bell above the door that rang low every time someone entered. It smelled of roasted beans and old lemons. The kind of place where time didn't rush, and neither did the people inside. Phoebe sat at her usual table, third from the window, facing the vineyard, trail, rocking Maria's stroller with her foot as she sipped warm tea. She didn't look up when the door opened. She didn't need to. She felt him. Kinley stood just inside the doorway, unsure whether to move forward or leave. The bell had betrayed him, ringing just loud enough to draw eyes, but not loud enough to justify retreat. Lucia, behind the counter, barely acknowledged him. She had heard whispers, and she didn't believe in giving men like him the benefit of doubt. Phoebe didn't turn. She kept stirring her tea, slow and steady, until he finally approached. He stopped a respectful distance away. I wasn't sure you'd be here, he said quietly. I always come here, she replied, not looking at him. I remembered. She finally glanced up. Did you remember before or after you forgot I existed? He nodded, accepting the hit. I deserved that. Maria gurgled in her sleep. Kinley looked down. It took everything in him not to reach out, not to ask, just to stand and witness her. His daughter. Phoebe's eyes flicked between him and the child. You stare at her like she's a painting you can't touch. She's more than I imagined. You don't get to imagine her. You chose not to. Kinley took a slow breath. I didn't understand what I was losing. You understood. You just didn't think you'd regret it. Silence. A long one. Then Phoebe leaned back. Sit down. You're hovering. He sat across from her, careful not to crowd. There was no tablecloth, no silverware, just chipped mugs and sugar in a jar. And yet, Kinley looked like a man sitting before royalty, straight-backed, quiet, full of reverence and uncertainty. I didn't expect you to let me stay, he said. I didn't, she answered. I just didn't feel like causing a scene in a cafe that serves me free pastries. He gave the faintest smile. It didn't land. She didn't return it. You're different, she said after a moment. I feel it. You used to sit in places like this and insult the furniture. He glanced around. I was arrogant. You still are. But now you're quieter about it. I'm learning to listen. Phoebe narrowed her eyes. To who? Your guilt? To everything. She didn't reply. Lucia came by, placed a small plate of almond biscuits between them, and walked away without a word. Phoebe broke one in half and handed a piece to Mireya, who had started to stir. Kinley watched as the baby's fingers wrapped around the biscuit. His voice caught. She's strong. She's mine. I know. And she will not grow up wondering why her father disappeared. Kinley flinched. I'm not asking to be in her life. Not yet. Good, Phoebe said, because you're not. They sat for a while. Mireya babbled between them, blissfully unaware of the quiet war happening just above her. She likes music, Phoebe offered, surprising herself. Kinley nodded. What kind? Anything soft. She hates loud. She gets that from you. Phoebe's lips twitched, but she smoothed them quickly. She gets nothing from you. He nodded, eyes dropping. Maybe one day she will. But only what you allow. Another long pause. Then Phoebe said, You don't get to reappear and act like you're reformed. I'm not acting. Good. Because I'm not impressed. I didn't come to impress you. Then why? He met her eyes. And this time, she saw it. What she hadn't seen on the terrace that night in Florence. What she'd begged for in silence. Rawness. Realness. I came, he said slowly, because I want to be a man she can grow up proud of, even if I'm just a photo in a drawer. Phoebe's heart clenched, not because the words were perfect, but because they were small, unpretentious, true, and for the first time she saw him as something other than the man who broke her. She saw a man willing to sit in the wreckage and not beg for rescue. Lucia approached again. Everything okay? She asked, eyes flicking to Kinley. Phoebe didn't answer immediately. She looked at Mireya, chewing her biscuit like a philosopher. She looked at Kinley, hands folded, waiting. Then finally she said, We're not okay, but we're quiet. Lucia nodded. Quiet is better than pretending. As the sun dipped lower, Phoebe bundled Mireya back into her wrap. She stood. Kinley didn't ask to walk with her. Didn't ask for anything. Phoebe paused at the doorway. You can come back tomorrow, she said without turning. Same time. Sit where you did today. Don't speak unless I do. He nodded. And for the first time in his life, Kinley Barrett was grateful just to be allowed to stay in someone's shadow. The next day, he returned to the cafe. Same time, same table, same silence. Phoebe arrived with Mireya just after the morning rush. She didn't greet him. She didn't need to. Her presence was permission. She sat across from him again, adjusted the baby's hat, and sipped her tea as if he weren't even there. Kinley didn't speak. He didn't fidget or check his phone. He simply sat, with the stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove and everything left to repair. On the third day, he brought a small sketchbook. He didn't draw, just held it. When Phoebe noticed, she asked, Trying to copy me now? He shook his head, just trying to remember what patience feels like. She said nothing after that, but she didn't walk away either. By the end of the week, Kinley had become part of the background. He arrived before her, sat in the same spot, ordered nothing but black coffee, said nothing unless spoken to. The villagers started to whisper. Lucia raised an eyebrow each time he came in, but never stopped him. She watched closely, though, like a gatekeeper guarding someone sacred. Phoebe noticed, of course. But she let it continue, because he wasn't performing. He wasn't begging. He was showing up. On a rainy Thursday, he saw her struggling with a basket of laundry on her way down the narrow lane. He didn't rush over. He didn't take it from her. He just offered an umbrella, holding it silently above her head. She accepted it with a nod and no words. The next day, he was waiting outside the cafe with a small bag of fresh focaccia from the village bakery. He placed it on her table and went back to his seat. She took it home. She began to test him, not with questions, with presence. She'd speak to Mireya and ignore him entirely. She'd talk about local herbs, about the lemon grove behind Lucia's shop, about the painting she was working on in her spare time, but never once did she invite him in. Still, he listened. He listened like her words were air and he'd gone too long without breathing. One morning, he found a sprig of lavender, tied with twine, resting beside his cup when he arrived. Lucia denied leaving it. Phoebe didn't mention it, but he understood. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. Then came the first conversation, not about the past. Phoebe had placed a small wooden toy on the table, something she'd carved from scrap. Mireya clutched it with both hands, giggling. "She likes simple things," Phoebe murmured. Kinley nodded. "Then she's smarter than I ever was." Phoebe gave a small, unexpected laugh. "You're still trying too hard." "I'm trying quietly. That's an improvement." One afternoon, Phoebe caught him outside the chapel, placing something near the stone wall. She waited until he walked away before approaching. It was a rose, a single white rose. Fresh, no note, no expectation, just placed exactly where she'd baptized their daughter. She didn't touch it. She simply stood there and whispered, "You're learning." That night, Lucia sat across from Phoebe at dinner and finally asked, "What are you going to do with him?" Phoebe stirred her soup slowly. "Nothing. He comes every day. I didn't ask him to. You didn't stop him either." Phoebe looked toward the open window, where moonlight spilled onto the floor. "He's not trying to be forgiven. He's trying to become someone who doesn't need it." The next morning, Kinley wasn't at the cafe. Phoebe noticed. She waited 15 minutes before sipping her tea. 30. Before asking Lucia, "Did he say he wouldn't come today?" Lucia shrugged. "Not a word." She didn't admit it aloud, but Phoebe felt something unfamiliar, disappointment. He had become part of the rhythm, and rhythm, when broken, hums in your chest. He showed up the next day, limping slightly, a fresh bandage on his hand. "Motorbike trouble," he said casually. Phoebe frowned. "And you still came?" "I didn't want to lose my seat." She gave him the smallest smile, but it reached her eyes this time. By the end of the second week, something had changed. Phoebe no longer guarded Mireya when he was near. The baby, drawn to voices, had started reaching toward Kinley when he spoke. Once, when he made a quiet joke, she laughed, a real sharp laugh that made him blink like he'd been punched in the chest. Phoebe saw it. She didn't speak on it, but she didn't pull the baby away either. Later that evening, he walked her to the edge of the vineyard path. Not beside her, just behind, as if following her lead. When they reached the hill where the olive trees stood, she turned. "I don't trust you," she said. "I don't expect you to. I don't know if I want you near her. I'll leave if you say the word." She looked down at Mireya, now asleep against her shoulder, then back up at him. "Come back tomorrow. We'll see what she says." The next day, Kinley didn't sit inside the cafe. He stood outside, leaning against the edge of the courtyard wall, holding a small paper bag in one hand, fresh bread from the local bakery, warm, wrapped in linen. When Phoebe arrived with Mireya, she didn't pause at the gate. She walked right past him, her chin slightly lifted, baby strapped across her chest like armor. Kinley fell into step beside her without being asked. They didn't speak, not until they reached the grove of olive trees where the sea breeze carried, whispers only the brave dared interpret. Phoebe slowed, then stopped, resting against the stone bench under the shade. Kinley remained standing, unsure of his place. She didn't offer him one. "Is this your redemption arc?" she asked suddenly. His brow furrowed. "I'm not writing a story. You were always writing a story," she said. "It just never included the people who had to clean up your silence." He didn't argue. Instead, he looked down at the bread in his hands, then back at her. "I just wanted you to eat something that wasn't bitter." She took the bag from him, but she didn't eat. "You think showing up means you've changed?" She continued, "I think showing up is the first step, and I'm not asking for anything beyond this moment." Phoebe studied him. The beard, the bags under his eyes, the posture that used to be all command, now quiet. "You said I was soft," she said, "that I was a distraction." His throat moved slowly. I thought being wanted meant being safe." He met her eyes. "You were never unsafe, just unappreciated. Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No," he said. "Nothing I say should comfort you. I'm not here to be heard. I'm here because I couldn't live with not seeing her face and knowing she existed. Mireya cooed softly in her sling, as if acknowledging the weight of the moment. Phoebe brushed her fingers over the baby's cheek, never breaking eye contact with him. You don't get to want her. I don't. You don't get to want me either. Kinley swallowed. I know. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the kind that asked for escape. It was the kind that asked for presence, for honesty, for strength without shouting. Phoebe rose to her feet, adjusting the wrap. She won't call you father, she said. She won't be told lies about who you were. I wouldn't want her to. And if one day she asks why you weren't there for her first steps, her first words, what do you want me to say? He exhaled slowly. Tell her I was lost, that I didn't recognize love until it was too far ahead of me. Phoebe blinked, as if caught off guard by the answer. She turned slightly, angling her body between him and the child. Not out of malice, but instinct. She doesn't need you, she said again, repeating the words that had wrecked him, but this time they didn't feel like a knife. They felt like a reminder, a line drawn in compassion, not cruelty. Kinley nodded. She doesn't, and neither do I. He nodded again, slower this time, accepting, fully. Phoebe took a breath. I'm letting you come back. Not because you deserve it, not because you've proven anything, but because I want my daughter to know the difference between presence and performance. I'll show her, he said. Every day. You'll show me, she corrected. And if you falter once, if you try to own what you've never earned, I'll vanish again. I believe you. She studied him a moment longer, then stepped past him down the path. Mireya, still half asleep, stirred once. Phoebe didn't turn around when she said, follow me from a distance, not because I asked you to, but because that's where men like you belong, until they've built a bridge strong enough to be crossed. Kinley didn't respond. He simply waited, then took the first step, quiet, steady, one pace behind, not chasing, just walking. The next morning, the bakery opened at 7. Kinley was already outside when the lights came on. He bought a single loaf, still warm, its crust dusted in flour, and walked it to Lucia's doorstep before most of the village had stirred. He didn't knock, just left it there with a small note tucked beneath the string. For the woman who made Phoebe stronger. He signed. Later that day, Lucia found the bag, read the note, and said nothing aloud. But when Phoebe arrived at the cafe with Mireya in her arms, Lucia handed her an almond biscuit wrapped in a napkin. He's still watching, she muttered. Phoebe took it. Didn't respond, but her fingers gripped a napkin a second longer than usual. Kinley didn't sit at their table anymore. He found a bench near the chapel steps. Every morning. Same time. Same stillness. From there, he could see them walk down the vineyard path. He never moved toward them, never waved, never asked to be seen. But he was there, and when it rained, he returned with an umbrella, held only over Phoebe while he stood exposed. She never thanked him, but she never told him to stop. On Thursdays, he brought white roses, only one at a time, left at the base of the chapel wall, always early, always gone before anyone could link the flowers to him. He didn't need credit. He needed redemption. The villagers started calling him Il Fantasma Buono, the quiet ghost, not because he haunted, but because he remained. Even the cafe dog, usually suspicious of strangers, began sitting near his bench, tail thumping lazily against the cobblestones. One morning, Lucia approached him and offered a cup of espresso without a word. He nodded in thanks, didn't drink it until she left. Phoebe noticed, not just the routine, but the restraint, how he no longer looked at her the way he used to, like she was something to be claimed. He looked at her now like someone remembering how to reintroduce himself to the same story from a different page. He didn't demand presence. He earned room by staying just outside of it. Mireya began to recognize him. She'd point from her mother's arms, laugh, kick. Once, when Kinley passed a fig tree near the ceramic shop, she reached out from Phoebe's hip and babbled toward him. Phoebe stiffened. Kinley stopped, lowered his gaze, and kept walking. He didn't break the distance, even when it hurt. That night, Phoebe sat on the floor of her cottage, holding Mireya against her chest. The baby had fallen asleep, lips pursed, lashes long. Phoebe stared at the small pile of white roses on the corner shelf, each one collected quietly after chapel mornings. She hadn't told Kinley she kept them. She hadn't told herself why she did. The next morning, a storm rolled in from the coast. Wind scattered fallen lemons across the road. The market shut early. Clouds turned silver with threat. Phoebe assumed he wouldn't come. She didn't blame him. But when she looked toward the chapel from inside the cafe, there he was, soaked, unmoving, coat clinging to his frame, waiting. Not for attention, not for entry, just waiting. She watched him for a long time, cup growing cold in her hands. Mireya pointed. "Da," the baby murmured. Phoebe blinked. The word could have meant anything, but the weight it carried struck like truth. She stood, wrapped her shawl tighter, and walked out into the rain. He didn't notice at first. Then he turned. She held out an umbrella. He took it without a word. They didn't speak. They simply stood under it together, watching the olive trees sway in the distance. The sound of rain making space for a pause, neither of them dared disturb. Phoebe glanced at him. Wet, unshaven, tired, still here, still silent. "You're not asking," she said. He shook his head. "I won't." "Good." A beat. Then she added, "I don't want words. You won't get them." She turned to walk back. He didn't follow, but this time, as she stepped away, she said softly without turning back, "Same time tomorrow." The cottage was dark when he unfolded it again. The lamp on the nightstand flickered low, casting gold across the single page he had read more times than he could count. The corners were frayed. A small tear cut through the bottom left corner where his thumb had gripped too tightly the first time he opened it. It wasn't meant for him, but it found him anyway. He had discovered it weeks ago. The envelope had arrived inside a package from Phoebe's sister, meant to return a jacket she claimed he left behind in New York. The letter was tucked inside the inner lining. No name, no date, just words. Words written by a woman unraveling and rebuilding all at once. "Dear Kinley, she has your mouth, but not your silence. She kicks when I hum Vivaldi. She stretches toward the sun. She smiles in her sleep. You never asked about her. Not really. Not before. Not after. But she exists. And she doesn't need your name to bloom. You once told me I was soft, but I was strong enough to carry her through your indifference. You don't get to be proud of her. Not when you never showed up. Still, I hope you grow into the kind of man who regrets this. Because regret is the first sign that something inside you survived your own pride. I survived. She's thriving. And that's enough. Me." Kinley read it again now, mouthing the last line like it was scripture. "She's thriving. And that's enough." The first time he read it, he dropped to his knees in the middle of his kitchen, the paper trembling in his hands. He didn't cry. He couldn't. Not then. The grief was too big, too dry. It cracked him in places tears couldn't reach. But tonight, he wept. Not loud, not desperate, just slow and raw, because these weren't just words. They were her final door, and she had closed it with grace. He kept the letter folded in his wallet, not as a keepsake, as a wound, one he needed to feel every day. The next morning, he brought nothing with him to the cafe. No flowers, no bread, no attempts. He sat at the bench near the chapel, eyes red, hands still. Phoebe arrived late. Mireya squirmed in her sling, restless from teething. When she spotted him, she didn't speak. But she noticed the difference. No books, no paper, no distractions, just stillness, and something else. Something quieter than apology. She sat across from him eventually, laid Mireya across her lap and wiped the child's face with a cloth. "She's been fussy," Phoebe murmured. "Doesn't like the heat." Kinley nodded. "Maybe she takes after me." "She doesn't. Not in that way." He looked down. Phoebe paused, then added, "She's loud when she's angry. She lets herself feel." He smiled faintly. "Then she's perfect. She is." Another beat of silence. Then Phoebe said, "Tell me something real." He blinked. "Now?" "Yes, one thing." Without dressing it up, Kinley's hand moved toward his wallet. He hesitated, then pulled out the letter. He placed it between them, folded, but familiar. Phoebe's breath caught. "How?" "Your sister sent it by mistake," he said. "Weeks ago. And you kept it?" "I memorized it." Phoebe reached out slowly, picked up the letter and opened it. Her eyes scanned the words, brow furrowed. She hadn't read it since she wrote it, hadn't expected to. When she looked back at him, something had changed. Not forgiveness, but the recognition that he had bled in silence too. "You shouldn't have read this," she said. "I know. I didn't write it for you. I know that too. Then why keep it?" "Because it's the only version of you that didn't lie to me." Phoebe exhaled. Mireya stirred. The moment sat between them, fragile, dense, irreversible. Kinley leaned forward. "I'm not asking to be part of anything, Phoebe. Not today, not tomorrow. But I need you to know I've lived every day since reading that letter as if those words were carved into me." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The silence between them no longer stung. It acknowledged. Lucia brought them tea and biscotti. Phoebe took hers with honey. Kinley didn't touch his. He just watched Mireya begin to hum, a soft tune she made up, tapping the edge of the cup with her small palm. Phoebe caught Kinley smiling at the baby and looked at him carefully. "Don't look at her like you're part of the story yet," she said. "I'm not." "Then keep your distance." "I will." She paused. "Good." But this time, when she stood to leave, she didn't walk away without looking back. She glanced over her shoulder and said, "Same bench, next week." Kinley nodded. "Every day," he whispered. The next few days moved like quiet clockwork. Kinley arrived each morning before the sun cleared the olive trees. He never sat until Phoebe arrived. Never spoke unless addressed. Never tried to shorten the distance she maintained between them. He was no longer seeking entry. He was asking to be considered, and Phoebe, though still guarded, no longer turned away with the same resistance. Because consistency, even when undeserved, carries its own kind of echo. One afternoon, she didn't bring Mireya. Kinley noticed immediately. Phoebe walked alone, hair braided down her back, linen dress dancing around her ankles. She looked unburdened, which made him nervous. "Where is she?" he asked. "With Lucia," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. A long pause followed. Then, with her gaze steady, she said, "It's time we talk." He straightened, not with pride, just readiness. "I'm not letting you into our life," she began. "I understand. I'm not building a bridge so you can march across it. I don't expect that either. I'm not trying to punish you," she added, "but I won't protect you from consequences." Kinley nodded. "Tell me what you need." Phoebe leaned in slightly. "I need you to stop waiting for a moment where I suddenly change my mind. That moment won't come." He swallowed hard. "Then why are you still letting me show up?" "Because Mireya will ask questions one day about who her father was, and I don't want the only answer to be a man who disappeared when it got hard." Her voice softened, but her spine stayed straight. "I'm giving you a window, not to return to me, but to grow up in front of me." Kinley listened carefully. No defenses, no speeches. He let her continue. "You will never hold her without my permission," she said. "Agreed. You won't be at her birthday. Not this year, not next." "Understood. You won't use your last name to impress her, or gifts to distract her." "I won't. And if you ever dare to tell her that I kept you from her," Phoebe leaned even closer, "I'll vanish again. And this time, you won't trace a single footprint." Kinley's chest tightened. "I believe you." She sat back, exhaling. Then she looked away for a long moment before speaking again. "You asked me once what I wanted," she said, "back when you were still cold and unreachable." He remembered. In a Florence hotel room, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing along her arm. He had asked it casually. A throwaway line between two people pretending there was more than silence between them. Phoebe continued, "What I wanted then was for you to choose me." "And now?" he asked. "Now?" Her eyes returned to his. "I want to be able to tell our daughter that her father became someone he wasn't proud of, and then decided to change that story." Kinley closed his eyes briefly. That hurt more than a slap, but it was the kind of pain that demanded transformation, not self-pity. Phoebe reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded sheet. She slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "A list." He opened it. It wasn't long, but it was precise. 1. One morning per week, you'll help clean the chapel garden. 2. On Fridays, you'll pick up supplies for Lucia, quietly. 3. You'll learn how to make the pasta you once ridiculed. 4. You'll volunteer at the vineyard harvest. 5. You'll carry no phone when you show up at the cafe. 6. You'll write your daughter letters she'll open one day, but never send them to me. 7. You'll stay, even when you're not welcomed. Kinley looked up, stunned. "You want me to—" "I want you to work," she said simply. "Not for me, not for show, but for the man you'll be when she asks who her father is." He folded the list carefully and tucked it into his jacket. "I'll do all of it." Phoebe stood. "Then start tomorrow." As she walked away, Kinley didn't follow. He watched her disappear into the grove path, where the leaves parted, like they knew who she was and bowed gently to let her through. He didn't feel victorious. He felt sobered. This wasn't a door reopening. This was a mountain being placed in front of him, with the instructions, "Climb." That night, he wrote his first letter to Mireia. "My sweet girl, today your mother gave me a list, not because she trusts me, but because she trusts who I might become. I don't deserve that faith, but I'm going to earn every inch of it. One rose, one morning, one mistake less than the day before. You are not my second chance. You're the first thing I've ever wanted to do right. Love, a man trying to become your father." He didn't seal the letter. He placed it beneath the small ceramic bowl Phoebe once made him, and he slept on the floor that night, not for punishment, but to remind himself comfort is earned. The rain started just after sunset. Phoebe was rocking Mireia in her arms, pacing the length of the cottage with slow, practiced steps. The baby wouldn't settle. Something in the air had unsettled her, turned her coos to whimpers, her breathing short and shaky. Phoebe tried everything: warm tea, gentle humming, even the old Puccini vinyl that usually soothed her like a lullaby. Nothing worked. Outside, thunder rolled across the cliffs, not loud, but close. Familiar. She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders and kissed her daughter's temple. "It's just weather, baby," she whispered. "It passes." There was a knock at the door. Soft. Twice. She knew who it was without looking. Still, she walked to the window first, peeking through the curtain. Kinley stood in the rain. No umbrella, no coat, just soaked linen and the look of a man who wasn't sure if he should be there, but had come anyway. She hesitated, then unlatched the door. He didn't speak, didn't step in. He waited, rain streaking down his cheeks, soaking his collar. Mireia whimpered louder, squirming in Phoebe's arms. She glanced down at the baby, then back at him. "She won't stop crying," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "May I?" he asked. Phoebe stepped aside. He entered slowly, respectfully. No reaching, no assumption. She handed him a towel, but not the baby. Kinley dried his hands, then nodded toward the small basket of linen on the table. "Can I try to warm a bottle?" She paused, then nodded once. He moved to the kitchen, lit the stove with ease, and began preparing the milk like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Phoebe rocked Mireia, watching. He didn't rush, didn't fumble, and when he returned, he offered the bottle without expectation. Mireia turned her head, finally latching. Phoebe let out a shaky breath. For the first time in hours, silence settled like grace. "Storm snuck up on me," Kinley murmured. "I think she felt it coming," Phoebe replied, brushing Mireia's damp curls. He nodded. "Children always do. You were soaked. I didn't want to miss tonight. You weren't invited." "I know." She looked up at him. "And yet you're here." "I didn't come for forgiveness," he said. "I came because I couldn't sit one more night wondering if she was okay." Phoebe blinked, fighting something behind her ribs. "She's okay now." Kinley looked down at the baby, who had started to drift. "I see that." Lightning flashed in the distance, casting silver across the walls. Phoebe moved to close the shutters. When she turned back, Kinley was still standing, still wet, still waiting. She tilted her head. "You can take your shirt off." He raised an eyebrow. "You'll catch a chill." "That's all I meant." He nodded, fingers moving to the buttons. One by one, he unfastened the linen, revealing the skin she once knew, now changed, leaner, weathered, real. He draped the wet shirt over a chair. Phoebe handed him a blanket. He accepted it without a word. Mireia fell asleep in Phoebe's arms. She stood, careful not to wake her, and walked the baby into the bedroom, laying her gently in the cradle beside the bed. When she returned, Kinley hadn't moved. She stood across the room from him. Neither spoke. The silence was no longer heavy. It was alive. She looked at him then, not as the man who left, but as the man who stayed through the storm. Not because she asked, but because something inside him refused to leave. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to see what that meant. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I'm not scared of the silence anymore." He took a slow step forward. "Me neither." Another step. Phoebe didn't move. She let the moment decide. When he reached her, he didn't touch her. He just stood in front of her, eyes lowered slightly, like a question without words. She reached up, gently tracing her finger across the scar near his jaw. "You still flinch when someone touches you there." "I forget it's there until you do." They stood that way for a long time, just breathing, just remembering. And then, without plan, without weight, she stepped into him. He wrapped his arms around her like something precious, not claimed, cradled, held like history and apology and hope. They didn't kiss, not yet. That would come later. Tonight, it was just this. Skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat. Two people in the quiet aftermath of something broken, choosing not to rebuild yet, but to rest. Phoebe whispered, "Stay tonight." Kinley pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Are you sure?" "I'm not. But I want to find out." He followed her into the bedroom, not as a lover, not as a father, just as a man trying to prove, by the way he moved, breathed, and lay beside her, that he would never walk away again. The rain hadn't stopped. Outside the cottage, it whispered against the shutters like it knew what was about to unfold inside. Phoebe lit a candle beside the bed, not for romance, for warmth, for light, for something alive to reflect the moment. Kinley stood near the door, still shirtless, still hesitant. She walked past him, brushing her fingertips lightly over his arm. Not invitation, not permission. Recognition. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. Mireia slept soundly in her crib, a soft rhythmic sound, the only thing separating their stillness from silence. Phoebe turned toward him. "I don't want you to speak tonight," she said. He nodded once. "I don't want you to ask me what this means." He lowered his gaze. "And I don't want you to make promises." He looked back up. "I won't," he whispered. She stepped closer. Her hand slid to his chest, feeling the heartbeat that once left her behind. It beat differently now, slower, present, humble. They undressed with no rush, not because of hesitation, but because they were memorizing each movement. Her fingertips found the scar on his side, one he never explained. He flinched, but didn't stop her. His palms grazed her back, down the curve of her spine. She gasped, soft, instinctive. He paused. She didn't. When she guided him to the bed, it wasn't about hunger. It was about presence. He didn't devour. He discovered. He kissed the inside of her wrist, the slope of her collarbone, the place just below her navel where her skin had stretched to make space for their daughter. She trembled, not from fear, from being seen. His hands moved like they were writing a language he had long forgotten, slow, reverent, apologetic without words. Phoebe lay back, one hand in his hair, the other gripping the blanket beneath her. When he finally entered her, it wasn't sharp or sudden. It was a breath, a return, a surrender. She arched beneath him, eyes locked with his. "Look at me," she whispered. "I am," he said, voice breaking. She cupped his face as their bodies moved together. No rush, no pattern, just rhythm born from ache and answered longing. It wasn't wild. It was worship. Tears slid from her eyes. Not pain, not regret, just the overwhelming weight of being wanted, chosen, in a way he had never let her feel before. She wrapped her legs around him, pulled him deeper. He pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths tangled. No words, just sighs, just truth. When it ended, she didn't turn away. She stayed curled against him, hand resting over his chest, where his heartbeat still stumbled from the weight of her touch. "You remembered my body," she murmured. "I never forgot," he replied. "You were rougher before. I was afraid back then. And now? I'm just grateful." They lay in silence, the candle flickering. Phoebe stared at the ceiling. "You think this fixes anything?" "No," he said, "but it's the first time I've felt worthy of your skin." She closed her eyes, fighting sleep, fighting memory, fighting hope. "You'll still have to earn me," she whispered. "I know." He pulled the blanket higher over her shoulder and kissed her forehead, soft, lingering, unclaimed. "I will The candle burned low, its flame softening the corners of the room. Kinley lay on his side, propped up by one elbow, watching Phoebe breathe. Her face was turned away, her hair a dark cascade against the pillow, her back bare beneath the sheet they now shared. He had touched her with care, but the weight of what had just happened wasn't physical. It was emotional, transformative, and terrifying. Phoebe rolled over slowly, eyes half open, studying him in silence. "You always used to leave after—" He blinked. "I remember." She reached out, ran her fingers gently down the line of his jaw. "You never looked back." "I was afraid if I looked back, I'd want to stay. And now, I don't want to leave." Her eyes searched his face, not for romance, for truth. Kinley exhaled, settling onto his back. His chest rose, then fell again, deeper this time, heavier. "Phoebe," he said quietly, "can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" She nodded, folding her arms under her cheek, listening. "I used to think strength was about keeping things buried, that if I didn't feel it I could survive it, that the minute I let anything in, it would tear me apart." Phoebe didn't interrupt. He swallowed hard. "And then you happened. And I wanted you too much. You were too soft, too kind, too honest. It scared me. Because I knew if I let myself fall for you, you'd see through all the things I was pretending not to feel." She reached out and took his hand. His fingers tightened around hers instinctively. He looked up at the ceiling, voice barely above a whisper. "When you left, I told myself I didn't deserve you, but I still resented you for going. I blamed you for taking peace away from me. But the truth is—" He paused. Then, slowly, painfully, "I never had peace to begin with. You just made me realize I was empty." Phoebe's eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Not yet. Kinley," she said, "you can't love me by performing sadness. I'm not—" "Then stop talking like you're narrating regret. Be inside it. Fully." He turned toward her. "I don't know how." "Then learn." Silence fell again. Not cold, not distant, just real. She sat up slightly, the sheet slipping from her shoulder, revealing a crescent-shaped scar on her collarbone. He looked at it, then at her. "What's that from?" he asked. She traced it lightly with one finger. "Childbirth." She came fast. "I hit the floor harder than expected." Kinley flinched. "I wasn't there. You weren't invited." He nodded, shame sinking deeper into his chest. Phoebe reached for him again, this time with both hands. "Kinley." He looked at her, eyes red, lips parted. "I need you to look at me," she said. "I am. No, really look at me. The way you used to avoid doing, the way you avoided every woman who ever got close." His breath caught. "I need you to let the grief have you, just once, so I know I'm not giving myself to a man made of armor." The dam inside him cracked. It wasn't loud. There were no sobs, just tears. Slow, reluctant, honest. He pressed his forehead to her shoulder, voice ragged. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She ran her fingers through his damp hair. "I know. I didn't mean to be that man, but you were. I wanted her, our daughter, I did. But I didn't know how to want with someone. I only knew how to want alone." Phoebe pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Her own were brimming now. "Then stop being alone." He nodded, jaw clenched, chest rising in shudders. Phoebe wiped a tear from his cheek. "You think I needed a man who had it all figured out?" she asked. "I thought I had to be perfect for you to stay." "No," she whispered. "I needed a man who didn't run when it got messy. I needed this, the breaking." He leaned forward. Their foreheads touched. They breathed in sync. "I want to try," he said. "Not because I deserve another chance, but because I want to learn how to be whole next to you. Not because of you." Phoebe exhaled slowly, then nodded once. Soft, final. She brushed her lips across his. Not a kiss of passion, a kiss of acceptance. They lay down again. No movement, no words. Just two bodies finally at peace, not because the past was erased, but because it was being rewritten in real time. Together. The morning after their first night together felt different, not because of what happened between the sheets, but because of what Kinley did next. He didn't rush out, didn't reach for his phone, didn't ask what the day held. He simply walked into the kitchen, barefoot and determined, and made breakfast. Phoebe blinked awake to the smell of warm eggs, toasted bread, and coffee. When she padded into the kitchen, hair messy, shirt hanging loose over her frame, Kinley had Mireya strapped in her high chair, gently feeding her mashed banana with a plastic spoon. "Good morning," he said. She paused in the doorway. "You're still here?" He turned. "I told you. I'm not leaving." She tilted her head, half challenging, half curious. "Even when it's boring." He smiled. "Especially then." Mireya kicked her feet and squealed. Kinley leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "She has your nose," he murmured. Phoebe took a seat across from him and watched, really watched, as Kinley cleaned his daughter's cheek with a napkin and gently brushed a curl off her forehead. "You didn't used to notice details," she said. "I do now. What changed?" He looked at her, eyes clear. "I did." That day, Kinley stayed close, not hovering, just present. He washed the dishes without prompting. He folded laundry without praise. He walked Mireya around the vineyard paths while Phoebe caught up on reading. He didn't ask to be thanked. He just did what needed doing. Later that afternoon, Mireya grew fussy. Teething, Phoebe moved to reach for her, but Kinley was faster. He took the baby into his arms, bouncing gently, humming low and tuneless, his voice grounding her. Phoebe leaned in the doorway and watched him walk slow circles around the living room, whispering silly nothings to soothe her. "She likes your voice," she said quietly. Kinley looked up. "So do you." Phoebe smiled, caught. "Maybe." That night, after Mireya had finally fallen asleep, Phoebe found Kinley in the nursery, standing quietly by the crib. "She drools like a waterfall," he murmured. "She gets that from you." He laughed, soft, unguarded. Phoebe crossed the room and stood beside him. "Why are you really here, Kinley?" "I told you. I want to hear it again." He turned to her. "I missed firsts I can't get back," he said. Her first steps, her first word, the first time she cried in the middle of the night and needed someone to hold her. Phoebe's face tightened. "I miss them too, you know," she whispered. "Even though I was there," his brows furrowed. "I was surviving, Kinley, working, worrying, panicking. There were nights I rocked her for hours and cried more than she did." Kinley looked wrecked. "I should have been there." "You weren't." "I am now." They stood there, two broken parents learning how to forgive themselves. Phoebe nodded slowly. "Then show me tomorrow, and the next day, and the next." "I will." "You don't need to promise, just do." And he did. Over the next days, Kinley became the man who loved loudly, but without noise. He bought Phoebe a new set of brushes when he noticed her painting again. He rearranged his business calls around Mireya's nap schedule. He learned how to warm bottles without over-microwaving. He sat beside Phoebe every night on the porch swing, not talking unless she started it, just being near. One morning, as the sun broke over the hills, Phoebe walked in to find Kinley, lying on the floor with Mireya on his chest, both of them sound asleep. She watched them in silence, hand pressed over her own heart, and whispered to no one, "This is what it should have been all along." The sun had just begun to warm the shutters when Phoebe opened the windows, letting the breeze carry in the scent of rosemary and ripe fruit. On the table in the corner, long abandoned, rested her canvas. A thin layer of dust coated the palette. Beside it, Kinley had laid out new brushes. No note, no announcement, just care. She didn't pick them up right away. Instead, she stood in the kitchen, sipping oat milk slowly, watching Kinley chase Mireya in lazy circles around the couch. He wasn't polished. He was in sweats, a faint milk stain on his shirt from a burp gone wrong. But he laughed like a man who'd been hungry for this kind of chaos. "Careful," Phoebe called. "She's faster than she looks. She gets that from you." Later that afternoon, she returned to the canvas. No dramatics, no declaration, just brush to color, color to canvas. And something inside her opened. Kinley watched from across the room, Mireya cradled in one arm, her small hand curled around his thumb. "She's painting," he whispered to her. "You see that? That's your mama's magic." The baby cooed. Kinley smiled. Phoebe didn't speak for hours. She didn't need to. Colors spoke in shades she'd forgotten she owned. She was remembering how to be whole. Phoebe stood at the mirror, brushing out her hair, humming something under her breath. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing his lips to her shoulder. "Don't stop painting," he whispered. "I won't. Even when I leave." She turned. You're not leaving." He nodded. Not this time. He took his time undressing her, as though he was learning her all over again. And maybe he was, because this time wasn't about lust. It was about healing. He kissed her forehead first, then her mouth, then her stomach, then lower. Every inch of her worshipped, every touch intentional. He whispered things he'd never said out loud before. "I'm sorry for missing your first doctor's appointment. I'm sorry for letting my fear speak louder than my love. I'm sorry for making you feel disposable when you were my anchor." Phoebe trembled, not from arousal, from being seen. When he was inside her, they didn't rush. There was no need. His hands cradled her hips as if he was afraid she might disappear again. Her fingers tangled in his hair. They moved like a rhythm rediscovered. And when she climaxed, he held her face and kissed her through it, whispering, "I see you, I see you." Afterward, they lay tangled in cotton sheets in moonlight. No barriers, no bitterness, just breathing. Phoebe looked at him, cheek against his chest. "You never used to say much after." Kinley ran his fingers down her spine. "I never used to stay long enough to learn how." And then came the mornings. Not grand, not perfect, but theirs. He'd make French toast, sometimes too crispy. She'd feed Mireille's colors from yesterday's palette dried in the corner. He'd read news aloud and make up headlines just to make her laugh. She'd sneak behind him, arms wrapping around his middle, whispering, "Thank you for breakfast, Chef Kinley." Each night, they made love. Not out of obligation, out of need. Not just for the physical release, but for the cleansing. Kinley whispered new apologies each time. Some were soft. Some were buried so deep in shame that they broke mid-sentence. And Phoebe let him say them all, because each one peeled back another layer. Of regret, of ego, of distance. Eventually, there were no apologies left. Only quiet, only warmth. Only a man who had learned how to stay. Phoebe stood barefoot on the balcony, staring down at the rolling rows of grapevines, catching the gold of morning light. Kinley stepped behind her, mug in hand. She didn't turn. "I need to say something." He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "Okay. I've been afraid to say it anyway." She breathed in deep. "I love you, I do. But I'm not the same woman you left." His brow furrowed. "I'm not soft in the ways I used to be," she said. "I don't trust quickly. I second-guess peace, and sometimes I rehearse losing you, even when you're right here." Kinley put the mug down and faced her fully. "You don't owe me easy," he said. She blinked. He stepped closer. "You don't owe me yes, just because I finally showed up." Phoebe turned to face him, arms crossed, not angry, but guarded. "I need more than pretty mornings and whispered apologies. I know. I need presence, accountability, patience. You deserve all of it." She stepped closer now, her voice trembling only slightly. "I don't want to wonder if your love comes with an expiration date, or if you'll disappear the next time something feels inconvenient." Kinley's jaw flexed. "You won't. I need you to show up even when I'm distant, especially when I'm distant, because that's when I need anchoring." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll anchor." She wasn't done. "And I need you to love Mireille not just when she's cute or calm, but when she's messy and loud and inconvenient, because that's the kind of love that teaches her she's safe." "I will." Phoebe's voice dropped to a whisper. "Can you handle that kind of work?" Kinley didn't rush his answer. He stepped forward, placed both hands gently on her waist. "I'll do it every day, for the rest of my life, even when I don't make it easy. Especially then." He kissed her forehead. "You don't need to lower your standards so I can reach them. Let me climb." She closed her eyes. He pulled her closer. "I don't want your forgiveness once. I want to earn your peace every single day." Later that evening, as the vineyard quieted and Mireille lay sleeping, Kinley brought Phoebe her tea, just the way she liked it now, a dash of honey, no lemon. She smiled. "You remembered. I pay attention now." She nodded slowly. "Then let's see how long you can keep that up." Kinley didn't flinch. "I'm not here to pass a test. I'm here to love you like it's the only job I have." Phoebe looked away, her smile sad. "Love isn't enough." He nodded. "Then let me add consistency, service, and humility." Phoebe looked back at him. "Say that again." He stepped closer. "Consistency, service, humility." She reached up, brushed his hair back from his forehead. You're starting to sound like a man who's finally learning how to love. I am. And then she leaned in, kissed him slow, deep, and without defense. Not because everything was healed, but because this time he was staying to help heal it. The fire crackled softly as a hush blanketed the vineyard. Snow had arrived in gentle flurries, wrapping the world in silence. Phoebe sat cross-legged on the couch, sketchpad resting on her knees. Maria was asleep upstairs, her lullaby still echoing faintly in the baby monitor. Kinley walked in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs, hers with a splash of oat milk, his plain. She looked up. I added cinnamon. She smiled. Look at you, chef and barista. He grinned, all in the job description of a man trying to do better. They sipped in companionable quiet, until Kinley reached into his pocket. Phoebe watched his movements carefully, not suspicious, but aware. When he pulled out a small velvet box, her hand froze mid-sip. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he set it gently on the table between them. I want you to see something. Her eyes flicked to the box. Are you asking? He shook his head slowly. I'm not. Then what is this? He opened it. Inside lay a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone on a brushed gold band. Phoebe's breath caught. Kinley's voice was steady. This isn't a proposal. Her brows lifted. No? He shook his head. Not yet. He picked up the ring and held it between his fingers. This isn't a promise of vows. It's a symbol of readiness. She blinked. Readiness? For consistency, for the long road, for mornings I might mess up but still show up for. Her chest rose and fell, steady, cautious. He set the ring gently back down. I'm not ready to propose, he continued, because proposals come with declarations. But I'm not here to declare anything. I'm here to demonstrate. Phoebe studied him, not the ring. Demonstrate what? Growth, patience. That I can sit in the quiet without demanding resolution. She reached out and touched the box, not to take the ring but to close it. Not harshly, gently. With respect. Thank you, she said. He nodded. I'm not ready either, she whispered. I know. Not because I don't love you. I didn't think that. She looked down. But because I've just started choosing myself again. And that voice in me, she's learning how to speak without shaking. Kinley's eyes softened. Then I'll listen to her every day. He didn't move closer. He didn't ask again. Instead, he leaned back into the couch. And she leaned with him. 2 people sitting in the middle of something real. No ribbon, no music, no applause. Just a shared understanding. We're not finished growing, but we're not running either. That night, she placed the box in the drawer by her side of the bed. Not as a rejection, as a bookmark, a pause. Because not every love story needs a ring to prove it's happening. The moon hung low over the vineyard, casting soft silver over the sleeping rows of vines. Phoebe pulled a knit shawl tighter around her shoulders as Kinley wheeled. Maria's stroller along the cobblestone path between grape rows. The air smelled of winter and sweet earth, of wood smoke from the kitchen fire behind them. She's out cold, he whispered, peeking at their daughter, bundled in soft fleece, her cheeks kissed pink by the cool. Phoebe smiled, leaning in to press a kiss to Maria's forehead. She trusts the quiet now, she said softly. So do I. They didn't speak for a while, just walked, until Phoebe slowed near the clearing behind the barn. The vineyard widened there, rows breaking open to a small terrace where they used to share evening wine, long before things cracked. Kinley looked around. No music tonight? He asked gently. She shook her head. No need. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his palm. There was no rhythm, only breath, only the hush of wind rustling bare vines, the faint hum of life sleeping all around them. Phoebe stepped in close, her head resting against Kinley's chest, his arms wrapped around her, slow and reverent. They swayed, not to melody, not to memory, but to something softer, something unspoken. The silence between them no longer a void. It was sanctuary. I used to think quiet meant you were about to leave, Phoebe whispered. Kinley tightened his embrace. I used to use silence like a wall, he said. She nodded. You did, but now? She looked up at him. Now it feels like permission to breathe, he murmured. They moved slowly, her feet brushing over his. I'm not waiting for an apology anymore, she said. I'm not waiting for a finish line. Me neither. They turned again, a gentle pivot. Kinley let his hand trail up her spine. "Are we okay?" he asked, barely above a breath. Phoebe didn't answer right away. Instead, she laid her hand over his heart. "I think we're learning how to be." Behind them, Mireya stirred, but didn't wake. Phoebe smiled into Kinley's chest. "She feels it too." "What?" "The stillness, the safety." Kinley's eyes flicked upward, watching the moon. "I've chased so many loud things," he said. "Deals, power, pride. And now?" He looked down at her. "I'd rather hold you in the quiet than win the world in chaos." They danced until their feet slowed to stillness, until the silence between them felt like a finished sentence. No declarations, no conditions, only a man holding the woman he wronged, and the woman choosing not to carry that wound like armor anymore. Phoebe pulled back slightly. Her eyes glistened. "This doesn't fix everything," she said. "It doesn't have to," Kinley replied. "But it plants something." She nodded. "And next time we dance?" He smiled. "I'll follow your rhythm." The morning came with shy light filtering through the frost-laced windows. Mireya was still snuggled under her blanket, humming in her sleep. Phoebe stirred slowly beside her, the scent of roasted espresso drifting from downstairs. "Sleep in," Kinley had whispered earlier, brushing her temple with his lips. She hadn't argued. When she finally came downstairs, the fire in the kitchen hearth was already going. A warm bowl of oats waited on the table, with slices of pear arranged like flower petals. "Eat first," Kinley said, voice playful but quiet. "Then I want to show you something." Phoebe gave him a mock side-eye. "This better not be another monogrammed silk robe." He laughed. "No embroidery this time." "I promise." She followed him out through the back door, fingers curled inside his, past the vineyard, beyond the cottage, toward the small stone building nestled beneath the cypress trees, the one that used to be her studio, once upon a version of herself she'd almost forgotten. The old door creaked open. Phoebe stepped inside and froze. The scent of lemon oil and pine filled the air. Her easel stood in the center of the room, sanded and varnished to a satin glow. Her brushes, clean, restored, sorted in glass jars, lined the side shelf. New canvases leaned against the wall, beside jars of paint in all her favorite hues. The stained floor remained untouched, just as she'd left it years ago. A preserved memory. The overhead light was soft, golden, diffused. And in the far corner, her reading chair, newly upholstered. The same fabric. Just whole again. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Kinley stood behind her, his voice barely audible. "I didn't bring you flowers," he murmured. "I brought you this, so you'd remember." She turned slowly, lips parted but soundless. "Remember what? That you were an artist before you were mine, before you were anyone's." He took her hand, placing a small metal key in her palm. "And if one day we don't work out..." His eyes didn't flinch. "I still want you to have this..." Phoebe blinked hard. "Why?" "Because you loved this space before you loved me, and real love doesn't erase that. It protects it." Her throat tightened. "Kinley." He stepped closer, thumb brushing her wrist. "This isn't a transaction. It's not about earning anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness here." "Then what are you asking for?" "Nothing." He smiled. "Just for you to paint again. Because that's when you shine. And I fell in love with your light, not your shadow." Phoebe covered her mouth. Tears rose before she could stop them. Not loud, not messy. Just the soft kind, the ones that say, "I didn't know someone could see me like this." She sank into the chair, hand pressed over her heart, shoulders trembling. Kinley didn't rush to hold her. He knelt beside her instead, waiting, letting her be exactly where she was. Finally, she whispered, "No one's ever given me back a part of myself before." Kinley brushed a curl from her cheek. "I didn't give it back. You never lost it. I just unlocked the door again." Phoebe laughed softly through her tears. "You do realize you've ruined all future gifts for yourself?" He grinned. "I accept that fate." Then, quieter, "You're not just Mireya's mother. You're not just someone I hurt. You're you. And I want the world to see what I get to witness." She looked around the studio again, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a woman putting herself back together. She felt like someone being seen in full color. The call came on a Monday. Kinley was in the kitchen, stacking plates while Maria mashed banana onto her high-chair tray like it was a mission. Phoebe was humming a tune, one he didn't recognize but felt like home already. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. Florence. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the screen. Phoebe glanced over. That your old number? He nodded slowly. Head office line. She said nothing more. Neither did he. Later, while Maria napped and Phoebe cleaned brushes in her studio, Kinley finally returned the call. His assistant, former assistant, sounded breathless with relief. Kinley, thank God. You've gone completely off radar. I meant to. Well, the board's getting impatient. They say if you don't return by next week, I'm not coming back yet. A pause. But they're offering equity restructure. You'd have full control again. No more partnerships. No more investor meddling. It's everything you fought for. Everything he'd once begged for. Everything he thought would prove his worth. He didn't respond. Just ran a hand through his hair, glancing out the window at the vineyard, where Phoebe stood barefoot in the grass, Maria toddling toward her with paint on her cheek. The life he'd imagined was in a skyscraper, but the life he was living now looked like that. Later that night, he stood at the foot of their bed, while Phoebe read a children's book aloud to Maria. When the little one fell asleep between them, her arms slung across Kinley's chest like vines, Phoebe finally asked, "You're leaving?" His breath caught. "I don't know." Phoebe didn't flinch. "I won't beg you to stay," she said softly. He turned to face her. "I don't want you to." The silence between them stretched, not empty, but weighted. "I fought so hard to build something no one could take from me," Kinley whispered. "But I didn't realize I'd built it so far away from the people I wanted to share it with." "You've always been ambitious," she said gently. "And scared." Phoebe tilted her head. "Of what?" "Of being small, of being still, of not being enough." She reached out and laced her fingers with his. "You were always enough. You just didn't believe it." He kissed her knuckles, then looked at her with eyes that held storm and surrender. "If I go back, I'll have everything I thought I wanted." Phoebe's gaze didn't waver. "And if you stay, I'll have everything I didn't know I needed." He stood in that fork between two versions of himself, one that wore designer suits and gave speeches in boardrooms lit with crystal chandeliers, and one that woke up to banana on his shirt and watercolor footprints on the floor. The board had offered him a kingdom, but here, Phoebe handed him a brush, Maria handed him joy. Which one made him a man? Phoebe found him packing, not a suitcase, just a laptop bag, a clean shirt, and the same wristwatch he'd left in Florence the day he disappeared from that world. He didn't look up when she entered. The vineyard breeze rolled in through the open balcony doors, brushing against his sleeves. "You're really going, then?" she asked, voice even. Kinley paused. "Just for a few days." Phoebe leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, not defensive, just thoughtful. "You don't owe me explanations." "I know. You don't owe me stay-behind vows either." That made him turn. His eyes searched hers, maybe hoping for resistance. She gave him none. "I'm not holding you here, Kinley." He stepped forward. "I'm not leaving you either." She nodded slowly. "Still, if you're going to stay in this life we've started, I need to know it's not because you feel bound by guilt or history." "Phoebe." "No," she said, gently, firmly. "Listen." She took a step closer. "When I was pregnant and alone, I fantasized that you'd come back one day, running through airports, saying all the right things. That you'd stay because you suddenly remembered how much you loved me." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "But I've grown since then, and I've learned something." "What?" "That love isn't just presence, it's choice. Over and over, with full freedom, no guilt." Kinley let the silence stretch before asking softly, "And you don't think I'm choosing you now?" "I think you're still afraid." He swallowed. "Of what?" "Of missing out. Of letting go of who you were before us." She stepped close enough for their breath to mingle. "I won't be the woman you come home to if all you feel is the weight of what you didn't become." He closed his eyes. "I'm not chasing power anymore." "Then why the hesitation?" "Because I built that company with my bare hands, Phoebe. It was mine when nothing else was. And now?" He opened his eyes. "Now, it feels like a monument to the man I used to be." Phoebe's voice softened. "Then maybe go, say goodbye to him, thank him for surviving, for building something from fire, and then walk away." He blinked. "You're telling me to go?" I'm telling you not to stay for the wrong reasons." She reached for his hand, held it between both of hers. "I love you enough to let you leave, but if you come back—" Her eyes shone with calm fire. "Come back not to repay me. Come back because this is your life now, not your apology." He exhaled like she'd lifted a mountain off his chest. "You still amaze me." Phoebe smiled. "I've had time to think." A beat passed, then another. He kissed her forehead. She didn't cling, didn't whisper for him to stay. She just pressed the baby monitor into his palm and said, "Face your old world, then come back and build the real one." The boardroom was quiet. Kinley's shoes echoed as he walked across polished marble floors, past glass walls that once made him feel invincible. Portraits of past CEOs lined the hallway like a gallery of ghosts. Men who built, ruled, conquered. He used to want to be one of them. He stepped into the conference room, placed his access badge on the table, then pulled out a single folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket. He wrote with his old fountain pen, the same one he'd used to sign merger deals. But this wasn't a deal. This was a declaration. "Thank you for the empire, but I found my legacy elsewhere." He signed his name, left a pen beside it, and walked away. It rained when his flight landed in Tuscany. The car ride home was quiet, the hills familiar. He could have texted her from the airport. He didn't. This needed to be done without fanfare. Phoebe stood on the back porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching the vineyard sway under the wind. She turned before he even reached the steps. Like she knew. Their eyes met. No rush, no storm, just stillness. Kinley took one step forward, then another, until he stood before her. "I turned them down," he said, voice steady. Phoebe didn't blink. "I walked into that room thinking I might miss it. And I didn't. I missed you." "I missed her." Phoebe lowered her gaze. "You didn't have to rush back." "I didn't rush," he said quietly. "I came back because I knew." He took her hand. "Not to beg, just to offer. You and Maria are my empire now." Her breath caught, not from shock, but from recognition. "You're sure?" He nodded. "I've never been clearer." She stepped closer, rested her forehead against his. "I don't want your empire, Kinley. I want your every morning. Then you'll have them, all of them." From inside the house, Maria's tiny voice called out, "Mommy." Phoebe smiled. "Come in. We're eating in 10. Kinley lingered on the steps. He looked back at the road, the one he'd walked away from, then forward to the dinner table through the glass. No applause, just a spoon clinking against ceramic, and a baby girl laughing at something no one else understood. He stepped inside, and this time, he stayed. The sun had just begun to dip behind the Tuscan hills, casting amber streaks across the olive grove. Phoebe stood barefoot in the grass, Mireia asleep in a picnic basket beside her, the evening wind weaving through her curls. She didn't expect anything tonight. They'd come to paint. They'd come to breathe. But Kinley, who had been quiet all day, suddenly turned toward her and dropped to his knees. Phoebe's breath hitched. Kinley. He held no ring, no velvet box, just his hands, open and trembling. "I'm not proposing," he said. "Not in the way the world taught me." She tilted her head, cautious. "I've written no vows, not because I didn't try, but because every time I put pen to paper, I realized I was writing to impress, not to confess." He looked up, eyes raw. "And you deserve my confessions." Phoebe didn't move, didn't interrupt. He continued. "I don't want a wife." She blinked, but he didn't flinch. "I want a woman who teaches me every day, who challenges what I thought I knew about love, who burns my pride, not to hurt me, but to make space for truth." His voice cracked. "I want you, not because I finally deserve you, but because I've learned that real love doesn't. It comes to those who earn it. It comes to those who are ready to lose everything for it." The leaves rustled overhead. A single olive dropped near his foot. Still kneeling, he pressed a palm to the soil. "This land taught me that things grow in silence, slowly, gently. I want us to be that." Phoebe's throat tightened. He looked up at her again. "I'm not asking for a ceremony. I'm asking for a lifetime of moments like this, real, undressed, undistracted." Tears welled in her eyes. Not from pressure, from peace. She walked forward. Kneeling beside him, she pressed her forehead to his. and whispered, "Then we begin here." Kinley exhaled, a man finally unarmored. There were no witnesses, no cameras, just an olive tree above them, its branches wide and sheltering, and a little girl sleeping nearby who'd one day hear the story of how her parents didn't marry for spectacle, but for truth. The grove had grown quiet. The sun lowered until golden light painted every branch, every ripple of earth beneath their feet. Phoebe stood barefoot beneath the olive tree, her curls catching flickers of sunset. In her arms, Mireia stirred and cooed, her soft sounds like nature humming approval. Kinley stepped forward. He held nothing but her gaze. "Will you say yours first?" Phoebe asked softly. Kinley nodded, voice low. "I vow," he said, "to never finish becoming the man you need. Because I've learned it's not about being perfect. It's about being present, fully, always." Mireia gurgled, tiny fingers reaching for his chin. Kinley smiled and kissed her hand. "I vow to listen more than I speak, to pause when I want to react, and to protect the quiet we've built here, even when the world shouts." Phoebe's eyes glistened. "I vow," Kinley added, "to never let your art become background. I will honor your brushstrokes as much as your heartbeat." He looked at their daughter. "And I vow to teach Mireia how to love by loving you in front of her, with tenderness, not ego, with apology, not defense." Phoebe breathed in sharply, as if his words had reached somewhere deeper than air. She took her turn. Shifting Mireia to one hip, she held Kinley's hand with the other. "I vow to remind you, even when you forget, that you're not your failures, you're not your past decisions. You're the man who chose us." Kinley's jaw tensed. "I vow to let you lead, not out of tradition, but because I trust the humility in your hands now." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "And I vow to be your mirror, not the one that flatters, but the one that reflects you back with love and truth." Mireia, nestled between them, reached out with both hands and smacked Kinley's chest with a proud little squeal. They laughed through their tears. No music, no officiant, just olive branches above, baby laughter between, and a love reborn beneath. They didn't kiss out of ritual. They kissed because it was time. Time passed, not marked by clocks, but by giggles in the hallway and the smell of roasted tomatoes on summer mornings. The vineyard didn't ask questions, it just bloomed around them. Kinley woke every day before the sun, kissing the tops of two foreheads, one small and wriggling, one peaceful and still curled under linen sheets. They never made public announcements. No headlines, no glossy spreads, but the locals noticed. The American man who used to walk alone now carried a toddler on his shoulders and learned to say buongiorno with a lilt. The woman who once painted behind locked doors now hosted art sessions in the open air, letting laughter be her new medium. And their little girl, Mireia, grew up knowing what steadiness looked like. One morning, Phoebe caught Kinley dancing barefoot in the kitchen with Mireia in his arms. No music, just hummed nonsense and grape jam on his white t-shirt. "Don't stop," she said. He didn't. On another day, Mireia ran through the rows of vines, Phoebe chasing her with a scarf. In hand, Kinley watching with a smile so soft it could have been mistaken for prayer. No one wore crowns. No one ruled. They just belonged to each other. They fought sometimes, gently, respectfully. She once called him out for overwatering her potted olive tree. He grinned and said, "I thought I was helping it grow." She kissed him. "Then help me grow too, but give me space when I need it." He learned. She softened. They both healed. At twilight, they often sat on the porch, Phoebe sipping wine, Kinley reading Mireia bedtime stories about wild horses and brave girls. And one night, when the breeze carried lavender and dusk painted the sky with blush, Mireia called out from the crib, "Mama, Dada." Their eyes met. No fanfare, just tears, just home. And if someone had asked them what their love story was, they'd simply say, "It wasn't perfect, it was chosen, every single day." My dear family, we've come to the end of today's journey together, but the conversation doesn't stop here. If this story touched your heart, let me feel your presence. Drop "I stand with you." Dr. Phillips in the comments, so I know you're part of this loving circle. Your words and reactions mean more than you realize. Don't forget to like this video if it inspired you, and subscribe so you never miss another moment of love and healing. Share this with someone who needs encouragement today. Until next time, keep your light shining and your heart open.